Okay. All right. So we will now move into the orientation portion of this meeting. And I just want to echo what President Cunningham said a moment ago, actually having worked in a number of institutions of higher education and being part of shared governance structures. I absolutely have to say that University of Minnesota certainly has a very rich tradition and history and support for shared governance. To the extent, one of the things that I have commented on regularly is, the fact that the Senate office exists in order to support that work of shared governance across our system. One of the things I'm sure some of you have heard me say as well, Jessica, Amber, I'm not sure which one of you are operating the slides now, but that's okay. You can kind of keep me in line, or we can go forward or backward. But one of the things I oftentimes say is that it's best shared governance combines effectiveness and efficiency with equity and fairness. How we get there is part of the work, right? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to a few of the amazing folks in the Senate office, and then I will join you to talk more specifically about the Senate office in just a moment. Amber, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Excellent. Hi, everybody. I'm Amber Bathke, a Senior Senate Associate here in the Senate office. So we'll just give you a little bit of background about shared governance at the University of Minnesota and how our system works. So shared governance is defined as a system that allows constituent groups to be actively involved in the development of policies and decision-making that affect the institution. And that's really what we're all about, is trying to make sure that everybody has a chance to weigh in on things that are going on that will affect their work or their studies. A well-functioning shared governance structure relies on trust and productive relationships between governance, the administration, and the broader university community. The University Senate office emphasizes collaboration and consultation between these groups, as well as collaboration within the governance structure, such as between committees and with the Senate office. University Senate governance, like President Cunningham just mentioned, includes faculty, non-unionized staff, and non-unionized faculty, I should clarify, as well as students from all 5 campuses and extension in senates and committees. Some committees also include alumni, retirees, and postdocs. So we really do have a variety of different voices that are represented in our structure. We recognize diversity as a strength and strive for committees that reflect the diversity of the university community. Something that's important to know about University Senate governance is that it is advisory to the administration. This means that with a few exceptions that are spelled out in policy, the Senates don't have direct power per se, but their power really lies in its ability to influence. So like Brian was talking about, the more that committees and senates are able to build consensus around whatever issue that they're working on, the more likely it is to be a successful endeavor. On the next slide, we have a diagram of what the Senate structure kind of looks like. So you'll see the big circle in the middle represents the University Senate, which is kind of the umbrella body of the governance structure, comprising representatives from all 4 of the other senates, which are faculty, student, P&A, and civil service, which are represented by the other gold circles. It's important to note, however, that the other senates do not report to the University Senate. All 5 senates have their own direct line to the administration. The University Senate meets about 7 times per year, and each of the constituent senates also holds separate meetings. Each senate also has a consultative committee represented by the white circles in the diagram. The consultative committees are charged with steering and executive duties for the Senate, including setting agendas, serving as a deliberative body for the Senate, and if needed, acting on behalf of the Senate. All of the other committees that are not consultative committees report up to one of the senates through its consultative committee. More on that later. So the next slide details the Senate's responsibilities. So The University Senate, according to its bylaws and constitution bylaws and rules, has legislative authority over all general matters that affect the university as a whole, acts as an advisory and consultative body to the president on any matter that may affect achievement of missions of the university, and has the responsibility to recommend to the president regulations for the governing of faculty, academic professionals, civil service employees, and students. So that's all very broad and vague language, which is, I guess I wasn't there when the Constitution was written, but I have the impression that it's kind of that way on purpose, and basically allows the Senates to discuss and make recommendations on whatever they want, as long as it's not getting into the business of one college or one campus. It's kind of a more overarching issue. However, as I mentioned earlier, most of the recommendations that the Senates make are advisory, and the administration is not required to follow them. So again, that's where the importance of consensus building and sort of getting a broad coalition together to make any certain recommendation is important. The Senates are very large bodies, ranging from 60 to 250 people when all seats are filled, and they meet fairly infrequently, between 2 and 7 times a year, depending on which body. Therefore, Senates are mostly kind of the last stop for initiatives and actions that come through, meaning that they provide input and they approve kind of things that committees have been working on, but they don't usually get into the nitty-gritty of policy changes, initiative, and legislative action. This type of work is generally accomplished in committee, which is where you all come in. Next slide. The next slide shows different ways that committees can affect change. The first, best, and primary way is through advising and making recommendations to the administration, often through consultation or informal dialogue at committee meetings. And this often goes overlooked because there isn't any fanfare about it. There isn't really even any documentation except for in the minutes. So often how things transpire is that administrators will visit committees, either at their request or the committee's request, or if they're a member of that committee as an ex officio member, to talk about a specific issue. In the course of these conversations, a lot of good ideas come up, and a lot of times those ideas are simply implemented because the relevant people agree that it's a good idea and it's feasible. A lot of things get done that way, and so I always like to point that out, because some committees don't make a lot of resolutions and statements and stuff, and that it can sometimes seem like they're not doing anything, but really a lot does get done without those kind of formal mechanisms that we'll talk about in just a second. Before we get to those, though, another way that committees have influence is through policy consultation. So policies undergo comprehensive review on a regular cycle of about 4 years, and many committees have established and documented roles to play in the review cycle, both for Board of Regents policies and administrative policies. These requirements are codified in the Senate Review Matrix, which is housed on the policy program's website. For example, most educational policies must be approved by the Educational Policy Committee, the Faculty Consultative Committee, and the Faculty Senate. And the policies on discrimination, equity, and access, as well as sexual misconduct, must be reviewed by the Equity, Access, and Diversity Committee. Those are just a couple of examples, but most of the committees have at least some, 1 or 2 policies, if not more, and in some cases, many more that they are required to consult on. So these committees are also consulted whenever policies undergo major revisions that are outside the normal review cycle. So turning now to what we call legislative action, there are 3 types of actions a committee can take when it would like to make its opinion heard in a more formal matter. The 3 types of legislative actions are a letter, a statement, and a resolution. It's important to remember that all of these types of actions are advisory to the administration. Once again, your Senate associate can provide advice on which type of action is best suited for the committee's goal in the event that you find yourself contemplating that type of action, but we'll go through the basics here. And to talk about letters and statements, I'm going to turn it over to Dina.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dina Barker, a Senate associate. Jessica, can you move there we go. I am going to talk about letters and statements, as Amber said. The first type of formal committee action is a letter to the administration in which a committee recommends actions or makes suggestions. The second is a statement, perhaps best described as a sense of committee statement in which a committee documents and publishes its opinion on a given matter, but does not ask specific action to be taken. Letters and statements are posted on the committee website and placed on the Senate docket for information and are also listed in the Legislative Action Tracker, which is linked directly on the Senate office homepage if you would like to take a view of that. And we do update it regularly as a Senate office. And I'm going to pass it on to John.
Good afternoon. My name is John Loff. I'm a Senate Associate in the University Senate Office, and I'll be talking about resolutions. A resolution is the most formal and most forceful committee action and typically should be reserved only for major recommendations. Most often, resolutions call for major change that either the administration or the broader university community or both aren't entirely sold on. Resolutions usually include extensive consultation and sometimes compromise with the administration and relevant groups within the university, including other committees. This consultation often includes elements of socializing an idea and change management, so that by the time the resolution gets to the Senate for a vote, people know about it and are generally in favor of it. If the resolution is approved by the appropriate Senate, it goes to the office of the president, who must issue a formal response. Keep in mind, however, that resolutions are advisory. The administration must respond, but the response can range from "great idea, we'll do it," to "thank you for the suggestion, but we're not doing that." This is why consultation, compromise, and collaboration are important. If the administration is involved throughout the process and has had time to study the request and how it might be implemented, they're more likely to accept the recommendation. Resolutions also go on the committee website and a legislative action tracker. Your Senate associate will help guide you through the process of writing, socializing, and bringing a resolution to the Senate. The Senate office has developed several resources to help assist in this process.
So I think that's me again. The next slide just has a couple of screenshots of where those resources that we've talked about are located. So we have on the top our resources page, which is at usenate.umn.edu/resources. And then the legislative action tracker, this is a picture of last year's because there's nothing on ours this year yet. So it looks a little empty, but last year's was very, very full. And that's just linked directly from our homepage. These are both also included in the links that are at the bottom of the agenda with the committee chair's resources. So you can check those out anytime. All right, I believe that's the end of my part, and I will toss it back to Lori to talk about our office.
Thanks, Amber, and thanks, Dina and John. Before we switch gears and I talk a little bit about our office and what Senate associates do and what you can expect, let me just say there is an opportunity for questions and answers at the end. However, if you have a burning question that stems from this first part of the information that was shared, I'd like to pause for a moment so that we don't lose that momentum.
I'll be that guy.
Great.
Pretty easy one, but if over time a committee does one of these sense of committee letters, and just as opinions change and thought processes change from committee year to committee year, is it ever a practice that a committee would essentially like document a change of the sense of the committee? Is that something that has any value?
You want me to take that one, Lori?
That would be fine. Thanks, Anne.
Yeah, I guess I can't think of a time when that's happened, but I certainly could see that it might, where a committee might, I don't know if it would be so much amending a past statement, but perhaps reissuing a new statement saying like updated views or practices or whatever. I think that's something that certainly could happen.
Thanks for that question, Joe. Jeremy.
Hello. Just a quick question. At the beginning of the presentation, you had mentioned that the membership of these committees is often made up of non-unionized faculty and staff, and I was just curious, was that going to apply to graduate students as well?
I don't have an answer for that. Amber, who has
I
been
think-
for many years longer than I have, do you
I
have a
think-
response to that?
I think nobody has an answer to that quite yet. They're still working on that issue in the negotiations, I believe. So
Okay.
to be determined.
Thank you for that question. All right, any others before we, oh, Stacy.
Thanks, Lori, and thanks for a great presentation. It's really informational and really helpful. So I've heard multiple times today that and this presentation specifically, that shared governance groups have these formal actions and they're advisory to the administration. That's been repeated several times, and I'm just curious. I've got 3 questions. So how much time is standard for administration to respond to one of these actions? Second, do shared governance groups have levers if administration is non-responsive to the advisory actions? And also, like, what happens if shared governance groups are unhappy with the administration's response?
Yeah. Let me see. So the first question was standard time. There's not really, there's nothing in our documents or bylaws that outline a certain time. It's kind of like ideal best practice to have it by the next Senate meeting, but you know, sometimes there's just issues that are bigger and take longer. So we keep it on our radar. We try to, you know, make sure that the administration is staying on top of responses, and they're pretty good about tracking, knowing like, okay, we know we have this response, we're working on it, whatnot, but not really a standard time. And I'm afraid all of my answers are kind of going to be a little bit like that in this vein, as in terms of what happens if they're non-responsive or if the committee doesn't like what the answer is. I mean, again, there's nothing that compels, with a few exceptions, the civil service rules being one of them, as you know, Stacy, but there's nothing that compels the administration to accept governance's recommendations. And so that's where, again, kind of like consensus building and building a coalition can help. It also has happened before that actions will sort of escalate. You know, a committee might start with a statement and then nothing happens, and then you know, we move on to a resolution or things like that. So I don't have a real good solid answer, and I'm sorry about that. It's one of the kind of the nebulous things about governance, that it really works so much through influence and relationships.
Thank you.
All right, well, Eric, we'll take one more question and just put a pause and then come back around for questions in just a few moments.
All
Please
right,
go ahead.
thanks. Maybe to also provide an additional answer to the last question, we found on AF&T that statements sometimes are not paid a lot of attention to, and so a better way we've tried more recently is a statement accompanied with a resolution that then asks for the faculty senate to engage in the topic. And so then when the faculty senate gets involved, that seems to carry a little more weight. And I think the administration pays a little more attention to it when that happens. So that's been our more recent strategy for things. But my question, I guess, was one about unionization and membership on committees. Is there a reason for that? I know it's sort of been the tradition for a long time, but I wondered what the sort of, you know, justification for this was. I don't think it's the case at all universities, but
So that
Jen, I see your hand. Maybe you can help me out.
maybe Jen knows.
So, when some of the FCC was asked to sort of pay attention when Pell reform was being considered at the legislature, I took a deep dive into some of the minutes from when Duluth unionized first. At that time, it seems, at least in the black and white, lack of context minutes, it seems like this was a legal opinion that the board was following, that unionization occurred and shared governance you're not part of. You are absolutely correct. I've had conversations with some folks at Rutgers because they are wall-to-wall unionized. But as President Cunningham pointed out, if you've seen one shared governance, you've seen one shared governance. So I think there's some unique aspects of our shared governance that may have led to that legal opinion. I had heard that it was a little bit of the board being vindictive of kicking unionized folks out, but reading some of the black and white opinions of the law, it seemed like they were following general counsel's advice at the time. So I'll leave it at that, but so it's not a great answer, but I think any real answer is going to involve a conversation with OGC.
Yeah, and I was just gonna note that when that happened, it already was the case that like AFSCME and Teamsters weren't part of shared governance, and so that predates all of that. And I don't know what the justification is for that either. It's always been kind of said in our office or kind of passed down that it's to do with state law, but I've never known where exactly that can be found. So it's a little.
And you know, the law changed recently, so maybe that affects that. I don't know. So.
Yeah, possibly.
All right, thanks.
Okay, folks, thank you so much for those excellent questions. And as I said, we will return to some questions. So if things come up in the next few moments, please make note of them and we will circle back around to them. The last piece of the orientation this afternoon is just to make sure that folks are familiarized with the Senate office and our team here in the office. So as I mentioned, one of the great benefits to shared governance, throughout the University of Minnesota system is that we have an office specifically dedicated to support that work. In fact, our mission statement, I believe, is on the next slide. I am not sure who is operating, but thank you. The mission statement of our office is to facilitate the successful operation of the governance system at the University of Minnesota by providing professional support and guidance to university Senate governance bodies and their constituent committees. So you've gotten a chance to, well, some of you already know many of the members of our amazing team, and you've seen some of them who offered to speak this afternoon. But I want to make sure that you have a sense of all folks, because there are times when other folks on the team may need to step in to offer some guidance or support. And I think it's important that you know not just the person who you may be working with directly on your committee, but with everyone. And as we kind of take a look at the folks in the team, one of the things I've included for you this afternoon is essentially all of the various committees and senates that people are assigned to. If you recall for a moment that essentially like org chart of shared governance at the university, one of the things that you probably noted is not only do we have a number of senates, but we have constituent committees that are attached to those. And so the folks who work in the Senate office have several groups that they work with. And so I think it's also a good idea to be familiar with some of those as well. So let me introduce you to some members of our team here. So Amber, you're probably very familiar. Amber is like my right hand. I am so grateful for Amber and her expertise in this office. Her and Jess, I will echo that with Jessica, who I'll introduce you to as well, are our longest serving folks within our office, and their institutional memory has been super helpful for those of us who have come on more recently. This is Amber, who you got to meet a moment ago, and the various groups that she works with. We also have, let's see, who is next? Yes, Jacqueline and Dare. Jacqueline, would you like to say hello or wave your hand or?
Hello.
Okay. So Jacqueline's been at the university for a very long time as well and has served in different capacities. We're fortunate that she joined our office more recently, and this is the P&A Senate that she works with along with other committees. We also have Dina Barker, who you met a moment ago during the presentation. Dina spent many years in the corporate world, and we are now fortunate to have her as part of the Senate office. And these are all the various groups that she works with. You also got a chance in the presentation to hear from John. John is one of our newer associates as well. And John works very closely with a lot of our, not only with the Student Senate, but a lot of our committees that are focused on, that really center students. And so these are the various groups that John also works with. Jessica, who I mentioned a moment ago, who, oh my gosh, is such a huge support to me and to our office. Jessica does a lot of the work sometimes behind the scenes when it comes to Senate that might not always be recognized, but let me please recognize the great work that she does to help support that work. Jessica is also heavily involved in our awards and honors program too. And here's the bottom line, because shared governance is so robust in the University of Minnesota, even as the director, there are committees that I work with as well, because there is a great need to be able to support and guide all of the work of the various committees. So again, I think it's helpful to, and that's our team. That is our team currently. We did have a team member who retired this summer, and we have not been able to yet fill that position. So that is our team, and those are basically our various portfolios. So if you ever do have a question that may have to do with another committee or another Senate, and you need to know who to reach out to, this is now you know who is basically overseeing what piece in that. The final part of the orientation today, we're going to do some Q&A, but I kind of wanted to get us started. So there's a couple of questions that I want to turn some attention to, because these are questions that I've heard in my time since I've been here. So I thought we might at least kick it off, so to speak, by addressing a couple of those questions. And the first one, especially for folks who may be chairing for the first time, is like, what does a Senate associate do? And I think this is such an important question, because it sets the expectation, right? So you need to know what to expect from a Senate associate, and Senate associates also need to be able to rely on you for the work that would be responsibility of the chair. So I hope that you will indulge us. One of the things we thought might be super helpful is just a quick little chart that kind of goes through who is responsible, who is responsible for these things. So if you have a question about them, here we go. So, and these are basically some of this is not, Senate associates have many things on their plate, but these are some core things that come up in the work that happens between the Senate office and committees and senates. So when it comes to setting the annual work plan for the committee, that should be something that happens between the chair and the associate. Both are on the same page. As far as scheduling like committee meetings and sending the calendar invites, chairs don't need to worry about that. Senate associate, once those meetings are set, will be the ones who send out the calendar invites. They'll have the links and other things that are needed. Identifying potential guest speakers. This is the work of the chair. Certainly there can be conversation along with the Senate associate, but oftentimes chairs are in the best position to be able to identify who are the kinds of speakers that they want to have, and that certainly can be in consultation with the committees, committee members that are serving on that committee. Reaching out to invite guest speakers to meetings is also something that we look to chairs to be able to do, because I'm just going to be quite candid with you. It carries more weight and it carries more significance when the chair reaches out. Now, as far as making sure that the guest speakers have access to the meetings and are invited and so on, that's something that the Senate Associate would do. So here we're talking about an initial reach out and why the chair thinks it would be important to have that guest speaker. Your Senate Associate is going to confirm the agenda before the meeting happens. Within about 48 hours before the meeting, the agenda will go out to your committee members, and it will have any relevant attachments that are appropriate for that upcoming meeting. The Senate Associate will also confirm the guest speaker and send out reminders about the agenda. The chair will lead the meeting. That's the chair's responsibility. We sort of look at it like the chair leads the meeting. The Senate Associate kind of runs the meeting in terms of navigating technology for that meeting. The Senate Associate will also review and edit meeting minutes. And we'll send to the committee for approval with a timeline for how long you have to do that before those are posted on the website. Senate Associates also should be collaborating on resolution statements and formal communication that happens within those committees, and finally providing advice and guidance on governance processes and precedent when applicable. So hopefully that is a little helpful in terms of what is it that, again, one can expect from the work of Senate Associates, and also where does the chair need take sort of leadership over. I'll pause for just a moment and ask before we move on, because I don't want to lose this sort of train of thought, but are there specific questions about this piece? And by the way, the slides, as well as all the resources shared, are available to you. If they are not on our website, they will be sent to you, so you will have access to them as well. Okay. Not hearing any questions on that. The other question I want to address is, why is it university senates and committees meet online? And so there are essentially three considerations that are taken into account with regards to this question: engagement, equity and access, and then technology, money, and space. So to be clear, one of the things that we've simply found in our office is that more people attend committee meetings when they are online versus in person. The reason for that is because in-person meetings can be prohibitive for some employees, especially those who don't have as much flexibility in their schedules to travel to and from meetings. And this can include employees on other campuses as well. And since we also all live in the Midwest, we know that sometimes weather can exacerbate things. But here's the thing: even when a meeting is in person, we do have to offer an online option, because there's always going to be committee members who will not be able to join in person. And we have found that it is fairly common for people who may initially indicate that they will join in person to pivot to joining online at the last minute. That just happens. And so most oftentimes these are sort of hybrid meetings, which put, Senate staff in the position of navigating both the online portion as well as the in-person portion, as well as taking minutes and other things as well. And the other thing that we also are try to be sensitive to is that when meetings are hybrid, if not intentional, what can happen is that people in person are engaged, but to avoid people online feeling siloed. The other consideration to think about in terms of meetings in person or online, and this is just something to me as a sociologist who specializes in understanding and addressing systems of oppression. A compelling reason or a compelling factor to consider is also that it's a matter of equity and access. So meeting online allows committee members with limited mobility, those with difficulty traveling, or those with health concerns, to be able to participate in shared governance. We can also use closed captioning when meetings are online. And there are some studies that have found that for folks from historically marginalized groups, there's greater participation when meetings may be online. And when we talk about equity and access, also taking into account folks on other campuses who may not be readily able to travel to Twin Cities areas for meetings. Other factors that to take into account as well are space and technology. So there's currently only one conference room in Morrill Hall that can accommodate the size of most committee meetings and has the technology to connect committee members via Zoom. Options for free conference rooms outside of Morrill Hall, the technology for Zoom are currently very limited. And while it can be possible to have OIT bring technology into a room to host a meeting, there's a cost associated with that, which can be prohibitive. So speaking of money, the final consideration is that in addition to room costs and technology costs, just to be clear, the Senate office has a limited budget to support travel reimbursement for folks on campuses outside the Twin Cities. The majority of travel monies that we do have is used to support annual retreats for consultative committees. And I'll also say, because this came up recently in a meeting I had with the finance folks, that I believe historically we've also covered at least parking costs for Twin Cities folks, but I was told that is a violation of policy. So we will not be doing that moving forward. Now, all of that said, the Senate office has maintained an option to request in-person meetings since late 2022. That request form can be found on the Senate office's website, along with the other resources we mentioned today. These considerations that I'm sharing with you are just that. They're considerations that we ask folks to simply take into account when deciding whether to make that request. So those are two questions I did want to make sure, in case we did not get asked, that we did address. But in our remaining 15-16 minutes we have, I will open it up for other questions as well. Kit. Oh, I think Eric might have had his hand up. I'm sorry, I just now saw.
No, Eric was first. I was just going to chime in and say that.
Okay.
All right, thanks. I agree with a lot of what you said about meetings and doing them online, but we had a couple in-person ones for AF&T when we were, we're talking about unit statements and things are kind of fraught, and doing some of that in person, I think, was crucial. We had members who were kind of quiet on Zoom, but were more engaged in person. And I thought the quality of our meeting was a lot better in person. So I think having one in person so people kind of get to know each other a little bit is great. And then you can move to Zoom and people already have established some sort of rapport, and then that can kind of carry on into the virtual world. But I'm glad we still have options to do in-person ones if we choose to do that. Is sort of at the chair's discretion, or is it a request form that has to be approved and there's some process that may result in it not being approved? Or
my understanding is it's approved by, first of all, thank you for that feedback, Eric. And my understanding is it is approved by the Senate office. We are the ones that will need to make accommodations for that. So it goes to the Senate office for review as the first step. And then there would be conversation with the person who submitted the request.
But generally, if it's feasible, it's presumably approved. And
if it's feasible, I mean, and again, my understanding is that there have been very, very few of those requests, but if it is feasible, I believe historically that has been the case, but I have not been here to answer that specific.
Sure. All right. Well, you'll probably get one or two from me. So, all right. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric. Kit.
Hey, Lori, I just wanted to chime in. Thanks so much for bringing this topic up. And, I'm actually going to disagree with Eric. I think that he's a brilliant guy, and also I'm a brilliant guy, so we can have differing opinions and still like each other an awful lot. So, this is something, I'm brand new to being the chair of the PNA Senate. But I was the chair-elect last year. And You know, something that I'm hearing really consistently, we have worked really, really, really hard on PAC for several years now to make sure that the Senate is inclusive of folks around the system. You know, previously we didn't have a ton of involvement from system people or extension people, you know, because when we met in person pre-COVID, they were, you know, bebopping around up on a screen and getting ignored half the time and trying to, you know, do this to get folks' attention, and it just wasn't manageable. And you know, now we've got this absolutely, you know, remarkable group of folks. You know, last year, PAC actually had, I think, 3 members from system campuses. And that was really helpful. Those were really critical voices. And I think we all learned a lot about what was going on around the system. You know, now I know that what we're talking about is maybe just a little bit different, Eric and I, right? The PNA Senate is a much larger group than you know the AF&T committee, and I'm super aware of that. You know, one thing that I really want us to be mindful of maybe is that, you know, there are several committees that from my angle, there are several committees that still need PNA representation, and the more barriers we put up to, you know, participating in those committees, I think the less likely it's going to be that those seats are ever going to be filled. You know, I don't want to keep going on here, but you know, it's this is a topic that I'm really passionate about. It's one that I ran on, actually when I ran for chair. And you know, as you noted, Lori, I think that, you know, being able to meet via Zoom and meet online, at least, you know, having an option that's actually really intentional is inclusive and equitable. And you know, we're all doing, for the most part, free work here. You know, if we're asking people to dedicate their time, we should make it as easy as possible for them to do that.
And for the record, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Kit, right? I think it's important for like chairs to get have a little flexibility, because the online stuff worked well for us, but having 1 or 2 in person also really helped. And it's just a matter of trying to weigh the balance, what's going to work best for a particular thing. So thanks though. So I think we agree a lot more than we disagree.
Thanks for the feedback from both of you. Okay, we've got about 12 minutes left. Other questions that weren't addressed in the orientation today that would be important for you? Okay, so here's where I'm like, I'm kind of vacillating between being a professor for 22 years. I can like hold out the silence for a very long time until a question comes forward. But then I'm also like, I want to have people reclaim their time. We've got things to do that people find important. So I don't want to hold you up if that's the case. All right, Ian, you have a question.
Well, it might be more of a comment than a question, which I guess was why I was reluctant to chime in. But I just want to say I'm the chair of Committee on Committees, and as such, I think kind of the responsibility of our committee is to make sure all of your other committees are well staffed and running and have clear charges, and we're all working together. So I just wanted to sort of introduce myself and also extend the offer that I feel like our mission on Committee on Committees is often looking through some very tedious Google forms to try to rank applicants, and I would much rather be working on interesting issues of what your committees need to be successful. And so I wanted to put out an offer that if there's anything that you would like us to be working on as sort of a place where we can have thoughtful conversations about how governance is working and how best to staff it, then please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to come to your committees or have you into ours and collaborate.
Thank you for that, Ian. Right. So I just want to, oh, yeah, Jeremy.
Oh, hi, just to follow up on that, I'm the new chair of the Senate Committee on Student Affairs. And I just think really onboarding is important, especially for my committees. I'm going to have a lot of students on this committee. A lot of them that have never been in any type of, this is their first time in a governance thing. So being able to show that we're supportive and we're not intimidating people that are, you know, going to scare them and that sort of thing, I think is really important. And hopefully we'll have the tools and mechanisms to really help these newer students, because I was a grad student when I started doing student governance when I was at Michigan State. And that sort of thing. And that was really helpful to have people there that were willing to help out and make sure, let you know, hey, you have a valid voice here just like everybody else. Go from there.
Lori, can I jump in quick as a follow-up to that?
Yeah.
So for those of you who haven't shared before, at the first meeting of every committee, or first committee meeting of every year, usually the Senate Associate will provide an orientation similar to this, but geared towards committee members, so that hopefully exactly that we can make sure that student members and all new members kind of know what you know, what their place is and how they can get their voice heard and affect change. And so and this year we're also going to be recording that so that if people aren't there, they can see it, because that's been a thing before, when if people join the committee late or can't make the first meeting or whatever, then they miss that orientation. So
Thank you.
Thanks, Amber. So I just want to remind folks that our website, if you have not visited, has a ton of resources available to help support you. And if there's something you're looking for and you can't find it, shoot us an email and we'll make sure that we get that to you. Part of the agenda for today as well had a link on it of some of those resources, just a portion. There's others, but just a portion of those. So again, part of the work that, the overarching part of the work that we do is to help support the work that each of you are doing. If there's a question that comes to mind after we conclude today, don't hesitate to reach out. Otherwise, I just want to say, like, I hope your first week was off to a great start, and we are super excited to see what we will accomplish with shared governance this year. All right, well, I'm giving you back 8 minutes of your time. So thank you so much. And I'll be talking to a number of you very soon.
Thank you.